Hey, this is William Tincup, Ryan Leary. You're listening to and watching the You Should Know podcast. We got Lakeisha on today. She's going to pronounce her last name because I'm a complete moron. I lived
I wouldn't go
outs-
that far.
I lived
Right.
outside of New Orleans for about 3 years of my childhood and had trouble with the names then. So
I'm gonna go with Robichaux.
There you go, Robichaux. That was
dude,
perfect. That was
that is
Look at that.
so not
Look at
it's
that.
so not fair. So not fair. Lakeisha, first of all, are you an LSU fan? Are you a LSU supporter?
I am. I'm an LSU and a Southern University Jag fan. Both.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
And you're obviously a Saints fan.
Oh, yes, yes.
Come on now. It's a given.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
You
you're in good company because Ryan's an Eagles fan and I'm a
know.
Cowboys fan.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Good
we've
company, at least on one side.
Cowboys
We
haven't been
both don't
relevant.
like the Cowboys.
There you go. There you go. Yes.
Y'all have won Super Bowls and been relevant. I forwarded Ryan this bit on Instagram the other day that a player that played for the Cowboys that won the Super Bowl in '95 has a son.
Mhm.
Son's been all the way through college and has been drafted to an NFL team since the Cowboys won a Super Bowl.
Ooh.
Like all those things happened. So yeah, we're coming up on 30 years. Next year will be 30 years
Wow.
since we've been relevant. So we'll get off of the Cowboys. All right. So one of the things that I loved about, when we first started talking to some of your people was the idea of talking about harassment, kind of the state of harassment, the state of sexual harassment in the workplace. And we haven't done a good update there. We haven't been good allies there because we just haven't been able to find an expert. So please do us a favor, introduce yourself and your company and all those types of things. And then let's kind of get into the unraveling and unpacking harassment and then getting into sexual harassment.
Absolutely. So I am Lakeisha Robichaux, pronounced correctly by Ryan. And
Duly noted.
I am the CEO of Chief of Minds, and we are an organizational development and human resources consulting firm. So
Oh,
for
cool.
our clients, we ensure, compliance, and then also we make sure that they are profitable, productive, and that employees perform well. So that spans from everything from human resources consulting, training and development, program management, staff augmentation, everything along those lines, change management to really make an organization grow and thrive. And one of the things that we do and we talk about when we look at compliance and training and development is around harassment.
Right.
What does it look like? Indicators, how to be aware of it as an employer, because it can definitely lead to high liability for an employer if they really don't understand what it is and really how to nip it in the bud and address
Right.
it. So,
Yeah.
just going into what harassment is and actually how it's evolved over the years. And I'll give an example. Just yesterday, really, I was at a meeting. And during the meeting, we were talking about the speaker was speaking on a process for businesses to apply for a certain program. And in the program, the individuals that are applying for the program, they have to indicate whether or not their sex has changed. And years ago, that wasn't something that you would have to indicate on an application,
Right.
as a business owner. And I had someone that was next to me and they asked the question, they said, would that be a form of harassment or
Let's say, can they even ask that question?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, because, in some programs they're women owned, you must be a woman owned company,
Right.
Things like that. And so the way that they asked the question, I told them, I said, no, that's not considered harassment because they're asking because it's the qualification for that application. But
Right.
however, there have been situations where in workplaces that has been a form of harassment. If a person had a sexual orientation change, or if they preferred for the pronouns to be,
Right.
let's just say, at one time it was a he, him, and they wanted to be she, her, or they. that has been a claim, harassment claim of that happening to individuals. So it has changed from what it's been, years ago. And that's just an example, something that happened on yesterday where someone asked me about that. Well, could that be considered that just
Right.
based on them asking that question? And so, that's just a question for qualifying, but inside of the workplace, that happens a good bit.
So
Have you?
asking
Yeah, go
asking
ahead.
inside the workplace, if I
Mhm.
were to ask you, for example, a question about a sex change, and you have gone through that, that would be considered harassment.
No, because then you are asking the question. So it really depends, like on the intent behind it. Are
Right.
you
Mhm.
asking asking this question, especially after they have told
Right.
you, no, I don't want to talk about it. Or they may be open to it. If they're open to it,
Right.
then it's not.
Then it's right.
Because there's something also called reasonable person behind the way on how they, I should say, perceive it, or how things are, the communication behind it.
Mm.
But if you're just asking a question, no, you've asked the question. That person can say yay or nay to whether or not they want to talk about it or not. If they put a halt to it, now,
Got
if you continue doing so, continue pushing it, then it can
yeah.
escalate to a form of harassment.
What have we seen in pronouns in the last couple of years? And is there any, like Ryan and I go to EEOC site every week just to
Mhm.
see different lawsuits and things like that.
Mhm.
And so I'm interested to see, like from a company, a leadership perspective, if they don't like pronouns, like they're just, that's not their bit. They just don't agree with it.
Mhm.
Is Can they be sued for that, or is it just that it creates a cultural issue that that people just don't want to work there because they're not progressive?
Yeah.
And the opposite is also something that's interesting to me. If they're pro pronoun, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
pronouns, and they want everyone to then encourage everyone to then kind of talk about their pronouns, but there's employees that are not comfortable with that.
Mhm.
Have we seen anything? Have you seen anything in the experience of where companies deal with that, or even kind of legal situations?
Yeah. So I have not. So I've seen it both ways, and I haven't seen any type of pushback of how,
Right,
if a company decides to use pronouns to identify, in emails and things like that, for identity purposes. I have not seen any type of pushback from
right,
employees. And then on the other side, if they do not choose to communicate that or have that represented inside of their emails, where an employee has said that you're not progressive or you're not considerate. That has not been the case in my experience.
right.
That they're either way that they've received pushback on it.
It's almost like you're just allowing the respect the boundaries. If you want to talk about it, great. If you don't want to talk about it, great. But just
Correct.
respect other people's boundaries.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Ryan and I did a new show Sunday, and Prepley did this study about video calls.
Hmm.
Has a bunch of great stats, but one of the stats that really floored me was 79% of people on video calls start talking, get interrupted, and then just abandon their idea. They abandon their, what they were going to talk about, because it's just like they got steamrolled, right?
Hmm.
Which reminds me of a lot of stuff that has been going on for years.
Hmm.
Now, it didn't break out gender, so I don't know the stats on that, but I'm just like 70. That's 80%.
Hmm.
80% of people start with an idea, and they just give up the idea.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't that a form of harassment,
I mean, well, it
or is that
could be.
just
So
or is that just
That
respect?
feels like a stretch.
yeah, it could
It might
be
be.
if someone, again, if it happens repeatedly,
Right.
if there's some type of slurs that go along with it, or things like that. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't say,
Fair.
constantly being interrupted is a form of harassment. Like, hey, every time I try to talk, it may inhibit progressive culture, if you would, inside of the organization. But I wouldn't say that it's ultimately harassment, only if it continues to escalate and there's
Right.
other factors that that add into it. So it would have to be, a bigger picture for us to say, that constantly happen, that's a harassment. But it would be bad for culture if someone is communicating and there's a person that's constantly stopping them from talking or maybe attacking them while they talk, then it may go down the road of harassment. So it
Right.
all depends. It all
So,
depends.
of the companies that you work with a lot of companies,
Uh-huh.
and so you're able to. You don't have to name companies,
Mhm.
but I'm curious: are the companies that you're working with? I'm assuming maybe not. This is why you're working with them,
Mhm.
but are they properly set up to handle harassment, whether it be just harassment or sexual harassment? Are they properly set up inside the company to handle these conversations and these investigations, or are they just so far off the mark that you go in and you're just like, all
Ooh,
right, you guys should not even be in business at this point?
Yeah. So good question. So in the beginning, depending on our role for them as being a client, if we are handling their HR, for some of our clients, we are their human resources department.
right,
So I would
right.
say yes, they are set up correctly because what
Yep.
happens is one, we make sure that they have sexual harassment training. And
Mhm.
so we either lead that training or there is an online training that they go through, but also they know who they should contact in the event that they feel that someone harassed them. And that's whether it is sexual harassment or regular hostile work environment harassment or whatever type of form of harassment
Mhm.
may be. And they come to us. And so we have had conversations with with the managers on what that should look like, the type of documentation that needs to take place, reviewing that documentation, and then recommendations for a decision of what that should look like. So yes, if they're if we are the HR department, they're good to go. Now, there have been cases, to be quite honest with you, where clients have come to us and it has been bad. And that's
Yeah,
why they come to us. And so
that's right.
we may
Mhm.
have to assist with the investigation. And we've told them, like, look, you need to address this. Employees need to be trained, managers need to be trained that this is why this is happening because there's no policy in place around this on who employees should go to or what's considered
Right.
harassment. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And so, yes, I have seen situations like that where, there's no structure around what harassment looked like. And then employees or managers really do not understand or realize that they are harassing an employee. Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
years ago, I had a really cool discussion with a physics professor, and he said, William, at the end of physics, it becomes art. Like once you get to a certain point, it isn't about the hard science anymore. It's about faith, hope, love, belief, art. It's all of this soft stuff. And I was telling him, in art, you get through the creative process, and at the end of art is science. You can see that it's color theory. It's all kinds of things that are more hard science based.
Mhm.
So I lay that groundwork to ask you the question of leadership. Do they know the edges of what is and isn't sexual harassment in 2024?
No,
And
not every leader. No,
yeah,
they really don't. They really don't. Because sometimes, and especially depending on how long you've been in business or how long you've been a leader, you don't see everything that goes on the front line, and
Right.
so you're not
well,
there. And you really don't understand it. Someone may come by and it may say, oh, this person said, this one thing. They're like, oh, that's nothing. They clown around like that. That's fine. But not understanding that this is something that's been happening for months now. The person has brought it up to their manager, and so they may not have known how deep it goes.
well,
Um,
can it be subject? Sorry to interrupt, Lakeisha. Can it be subjective in insofar as one person's harassment as an employee?
mhm.
One person's harassment is not another person's harassment, or is it, or should it be, probably a better way to phrase that, should it be just a clear mandate that
Hmm.
this is harassment, it's defined, don't do it, and don't
So
accept it,
yeah, but no, it's always going to be honestly that gray area with it because
right,
what some people may feel is okay because you think about morals, you think about values. For some things, it may be okay for someone to maybe compliment someone on the way that they look,
right,
and maybe something revealing that the other person they may be uncomfortable with that, and that actually happens a lot. I
Yeah.
Right.
just said that, she looked good in the dress and that dress hugged her in all the
Yeah.
right spots,
Right.
ways or whatever.
Perception is
And
Right.
reality
exactly. And
of
for
the other
that person,
person.
that's okay. And for them to constantly say that, although the person is telling them, okay, thank you, but my husband wouldn't like that, so please don't say that
Right.
again. And they
That's fair.
continue to do it. Well, I'm just giving a
Yeah.
compliment. The
Ah,
constant after I've warned you, I've
Yeah.
said I don't like it. So
it's not a compliment on the fourth
Yeah.
time.
This
yes,
is
You're actually,
yes,
it's
this
it's
the
is
intent
interesting.
behind
repetitive.
it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
this is kind of this is why I would make an awful HR person. Because not because I do give comments that way. Because
You can you pronounce her last name well. You at
eh,
least could do that. I
yeah, I
couldn't
could
even
do
do
that.
that.
Yes, that he
I,
did.
I,
Failure.
I watch Law and Order, right?
Hmm.
SVU because I'm dark, and so I always in my mind I think like, where's that line between you're supporting the victim versus the alleged perpetrator? Right?
Hmm.
Like, is there that, like, oh, okay, I can kind of see both sides of the
Hmm.
story. Where does HR fall? Or in this case, where do you fall? Whoever's doing the investigations, if there's no clear line, and I know there is a line, right? There's a
Yeah.
clear definition of harassment. There's a clear definition of sexual harassment.
I
But
don't know if there is
where
actually.
does HR
I
fall?
don't. I don't know if there is a clear definition of those two things.
I mean, you could go and define, find what the actual definition is.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, it'll
but for
vary. But
HR, it's not.
so
It's
yeah,
not.
with HR for us, and it's gonna be determined like where we fall at is the facts. What are
That's
the
right.
facts? What
Mhm.
happened? Give us some documentation. Do we have emails? Do we have text messages? Do we have witnesses?
Right.
We're going to interview the witnesses, get the witness statements. That's where we fall in. Is it's all about the facts.
And you also, part of those facts is looking at the employment agreement, the employee handbook,
Mhm.
policies that they've
That's the
created, et cetera.
documentation.
Right. The
Absolutely. Yes, that's
documentation.
that's the documentation. That's what we're gonna lie in. What happened, who, what, when, where, did this happen? Give us all of the facts. And that's where we make
Mhm.
our recommendations when it comes to human resources. It's all about facts and documentation.
Where does this leave HR and go to authorities? Is it
Oh,
after you
nice.
make the determination, or is it I just feel really violated? I'm gonna skip HR. Like, why would HR? And I think this is we've heard
Are you
this, and
talking
this is
about authorities internal, like
no,
leadership, or
no,
are you
no, no,
talking about
external,
police?
You
like
talking about like
police.
the police?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, looking at it from
Interesting.
someone who's feeling the harassment,
Hmm.
thinking, why would someone in HR, not you, but like HR, like why
Yeah.
would this person in HR handle harassment at
Right.
the company? I believe they're going to represent the company over me. I'm going to go to the authority. Where does HR get involved there versus step out of the way?
So, and hopefully the employee knows that human resources, that HR department is there for them when it comes to harassment.
100%.
Hopefully the
Yeah.
employee handbook,
Oh,
most
100%.
employee handbooks are going to say either go speak with a manager or a human resources department. And that's why you want an HR department, because you want someone that's neutral, because
Right.
sometimes it can be the employee's manager that is doing the harassment. And of course, they're not going to feel
Yeah.
comfortable going to that person,
Right.
and even maybe going over their head. So you want to have human resources, a neutral party in there that's going to
Right.
investigate it, that's going to take it seriously and address it. So most of the time with organizations, the employee handbook will say it, or HR will say, anytime there's some type of concern, grievance, complaint, harassment, please come and talk to us so that way we
Right.
can address it. And sometimes we do have to get the authorities involved. It depends on
Yeah.
what's going on. If charges have to be filed, we will bring in authorities depending upon the severity of the case
Like
that's brought to us.
sexual assault would be one of those things.
Correct,
If it wasn't
correct,
Yeah.
just if it wasn't just harassment, it went all the way over to assault.
correct. Yes, if
Pushing
Yeah.
someone
somebody
was
up against the
assaulted, we're
wall.
definitely bringing in the authorities, the
100%.
local authorities
Yeah.
for that. Absolutely.
So I think so. I've done sexual harassment investigations before, and okay, the documentation, the facts. I love everything you're saying. I think from a company's perspective, if it's a low performer, it's really easy to get rid of that problem.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's really okay, Bobby, just a serial harasser. Okay, but Bobby's also a C player, maybe a D player.
Mhm.
Okay, that to me, in my experience at least, has always been easy to reconcile.
Mhm.
What's harder, and I think maybe might be harder for some leaders, is when Bobby's a top performer, like an A player, especially like in sales or something like that. Bobby's bringing in $20 million of business, also a serial harasser, sexual harasser. I see executives and board members struggle with what to do with Bobby. Now,
Yeah.
what do you see? I mean, that's just my very limited perspective.
Mhm.
What do you see? You're the expert.
Yeah, and oftentimes, especially if I don't know, I can't remember the names that you use. I think it might have been Bobby, but if Bobby was, especially if he's been with the company a long time, he doesn't
Uh-huh.
have this track record of any type of harassment. Sometimes it's hard to believe, but as
Right.
HR, you have to take the stance. You know, these are the facts, and it occurred, and it's unfortunate, but something has to be done. It has to be addressed, and that
Right.
being addressed may be termination, you know, depending
Right.
on, you know, what it was, whatever type of harassment it is. But you have to take a stand, you have to take action and address it. You cannot allow it just because Bobby is higher up in the organization.
Right.
You know, you have a duty to protect, you know, the employees of that organization
Yeah.
and do the right thing.
Do you find it's more difficult to get rid of a leader in a company or
Great
bring a
question.
leader up on charges of investigation versus me at a company?
Yeah.
Yeah, always. Yeah. Because I'm not gonna say always, but yeah, but yes, because leaders oftentimes, especially depending on what their roles are, you know, if they have brought a lot to the organization, yeah, there's it's more, or especially depending on if there's a board involved, things like that, or what the
Hmm.
termination process. Because for some individuals, depending on the hierarchy of the company, the leader may report to the board. You know, not
Hmm.
operations. Who do they report to? Who has the
Right.
termination authority. So it's not as easy to say, okay, if you have an employee that's not in a leadership role, it may be easy to go ahead and do the termination.
Right.
Whereas you may have to have their process for a leader may be that two or three other people,
Hmm.
stakeholders have to, you know, agree to vote to terminate or what have you. So oftentimes that is a little bit more involved, if you would, to terminate a leader. And that's regardless if
Yeah.
it's harassment or not, whatever it may be.
So
It
Right.
may be
zero
performance.
tolerance doesn't
Yeah.
matter there. Zero
Yeah. It
zero
may be
tolerance is not
performance
zero
related.
tolerance.
Say
Well,
that
I've
again.
seen, I
Zero tolerance is not zero tolerance at most of these companies. It's
And
more
it
yeah,
may, yeah, it may be
if
my, and it may
different
be zero
rules.
tolerance, but again, the process, that's more the process
the
may
process.
Yes.
be a bit more in depth, and it's going to take more time because of them being in a leadership role. And they may
Right.
have dual reporting or whatever. Okay, they're
Yeah.
not performing well. We need to terminate this person.
Right.
I've seen it in situations where HR reports to ops or finance,
Mhm.
and those, let's say it's the CFO or COO, just make it easier for the audience to kind of envision. They get a claim, they investigate it, they get the facts, they get the documentation, and it's for sure. It's this clear case. Now, who do they go to when it's people that manage them?
Yeah.
And I think I think that becomes harder for HR pros to then go, I need to actually go to the CEO and the board and say, this is lay everything out
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
then go from there.
and
But
that's and that's how it should be. That it's
right.
not like that, and that's why I am a strong believer that human resources, internal HR departments should report directly to the CEO and not
Yeah, agreed.
other departments.
Agreed.
And sometimes it has been in cases that I've seen where it's the CEO that the complaint was filed on. And so, if that's the case, you know, and ultimately you try to keep the investigation confidential as possible, but you may have to, and this is regardless if it's a CEO or not, whomever, because you have to investigate it, you know, inform them because you got to get their side of the story. But then you will go to the board in which that CEO reports to and inform the board because they then have to make a decision, you know, on what will that look like, you know, and the
Right.
action steps from there.
Now,
So, oh, go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
let's say so if the claims made against the CEO, and I think this is important for people that might be listening who are afraid to
Right.
make these claims. If the CEO is the one where is the person that the claim is against,
Mm.
do you automatically go to the board? Is this person automatically reported, or is it based on the investigation and the severity of the claim?
So you always let the
It's a great
person know
question.
that filed the claim that, you're going to try to keep it as confidential as possible, but 9 times out of 10, you will have to inform them because you have to
Mhm.
investigate it. You have to get
Sorry.
their side of the story. You know,
Sorry.
you just
Oh
have.
yeah, yeah. But do we go to the board immediately, or is it based on the results of the investigation? Does the
No,
board
usually
always
it's going to
know?
be based because you want to go to the board with all of the facts. So you're
Facts.
going to
Right.
inform the CEO because you need to interview him or
Sure.
her, get their side of the story, and then you go to the board with the facts. Now, at some point, you still, even initially, and it depends on the relationship, which there should be a relationship there with the board where they know who they should contact, who are the individuals
Right.
on
Right.
the board, that they are going to communicate with the board just to give them a heads up to say, hey, we did receive this investigation, just giving you a heads up, letting you know. I will circle back once the investigation is complete, and then I'll, give all of the
Yeah.
information to you. So you're still going to inform them, but you're going to get it to them after once you've done everything, so that
Right.
you can present everything to them at that time. But
Right.
you're going to give
And
them a heads up and let them know in case word
Yeah.
gets out. You don't want, that to be the last thing that they hear
Right.
about.
So where I'm going with that is the fear of retribution, the
100%.
retaliation, right?
Mhm.
That's why
If
people don't report.
Right, it's why they don't report. And if I don't believe that, regardless of the outcome of the investigation, if the board who has oversight of the CEO is not made aware, who's
Mhm.
to say that CEO can't come back and retaliate against me with no oversight other than someone in HR who originally didn't report it to their
Report them.
I
And
yeah.
that's
I'd
also
go
important, as I said, to inform the board, to let the board know, hey,
Right.
we're completing this
case
investigation.
in
Yes,
case this happens so that they can see it. I
Yeah.
correct.
think it's 100% retaliation, Ryan. If
Yes.
Yeah.
the
And you need to
CEO
go ahead.
can get away with it, I think they absolutely get away with it.
And that's why the duty really of that HR department is to inform the employee that the company does not believe in retaliation,
That's
and
right.
the HR department has to hold true to that and know that if there's some form of retaliation, that they
Right.
need to address it, and not allow it. That's their role, that they should be making sure that there is no retaliation there.
Real quick question. Average sexual harassment investigation used to be 6 week-ish. I
Mhm.
know it's probably moved and it's changed, obviously. So, for the audience edification, what does that look like from a time period?
And honestly, it depends. I mean, sometimes it can be faster than 6 weeks, to be quite honest
Okay.
with you, depending on, because it's going to depend on how many witnesses you have, how much
Right.
documentation you have to go through, who
Right.
all was involved in it. So it really varies. So I honestly could just give, say, hey, yeah, 6 weeks. Sometimes 4 weeks is probably like a month, because that's something that you want to address like ASAP. You don't want to sit on it.
Yeah.
As soon
Right.
as you get that in, you want to address it, meet with them, get all of the documentation, find out who the witnesses were, so that way you can meet with them
Yeah.
and try to get it addressed ASAP.
Does If someone comes with a claim of sexual harassment or even harassment, right? I guess those are two different classes. The Does that claim take precedence over something else that might be investigated, might be in
Oh, interesting.
investigation at the moment? Does that automatically go to the top of the
Yes.
line or to
Yes.
another
We're going to
person?
make a priority. Yeah, I can speak for us that we definitely make it a priority.
Yeah.
But while we're doing investigations, all other investigations, we keep the employees looped in, timing
Yeah.
wise, what this look like. So we stay in contact with them. But yes, if it's a sexual harassment, it is something that we get on top of immediately. We're not going to just wait and
Hmm.
say, oh, hey, we have this, building up. We're going to circle back in 2 weeks. No,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's the severity of the claim too. I would
correct.
assume that
Right.
you have to factor in.
Mhm.
So, Lakeisha, this is a point in the podcast where you absolutely hate me. So
What is that?
I went to the University of Alabama. So LSU is not a school that I care about.
Which is why he
Um,
asked you about LSU
that's
earlier.
why
Now
exactly why
I
I asked.
know.
He was
Now I
setting
know.
you up for this.
I see
100%,
that. I see
100%,
that.
100%. All right. So I had a ethics class at one point, and we did a week on racism and the
Mhm,
ethics of racism. It's a crazy class,
mhm,
crazy professor, crazy class. Anyhow, and he basically started the class like, do you want your racism in front of you, or do you want it behind closed doors?
mhm.
So everyone's arguing, because it's an ethics class. Of
Mhm.
course we're arguing. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, you want the Klan just kind of parading on your street, or do you want them in suits that you don't know who they are?
Mhm.
And I say all that as a backdrop to one of the things I think we agreed on, I have to go back, is you can't change races. Like this was a really good discussion we got to at the end of the week. I think it was a 2 week. Got to this bit like, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. In some ways, that you just can't change races. So
Mhm.
whether or not they're behind closed doors, you don't know who they are, they're hidden in some way, or they're out wearing their sheets and doing whatever, you're not going to be able to change them. They're racist. You can't change them. Now that's the backdrop to the question about sexual harassment. Can you change someone that's hardwired to be a person that just doesn't respect sexual boundaries? Like in your heart, because you do training and you see all kinds, like the information part, like I get, like getting everybody up to date with what we can and can't do and what not to do at a Christmas party and all that's like, I fundamentally totally understand why that is important, supported 100%, budget done. The struggle I have is, okay, if that, I'll just say guys, because I think probably 70% is guys. So if that guy is just hardwired to be that way, there's no amount of training that's going to change him. He's just going to be that way. Now, again, tear that apart, other than the Alabama part. Tear that apart.
So, can you change them? A person. So I do. We've had training sessions, sexual harassment, where we have made a lot of progress to individuals that disagree with what sexual harassment was, what it stood
Right,
for.
right,
But it's not just a one-time thing. That's the
right,
part about change, is because I do agree that it has to be something that's internally in their heart that they really feel, and you have to give them examples. You have to show them how it affects others. They really have to listen and be bought in on that. So it depends on the individual. There's no one size fits all. So for me to say, well, yeah, you can change everybody. They have to be
right,
willing to change and understand how it impacts others.
right.
And how it correlates with the values that they have inside. But it's not a one-time thing. But you can change a person and the outlook of that. Because, and I won't say to the extreme. For some, to give examples, I always have to. This is always a debate, to be quite honest with you. When we do sexual harassment training, we talk about how, the touching, we're from the South. We
Dude,
hug, we touch, we
I,
pat, on the
I,
Mhm.
back. When you see
I can
someone
tell
in
you,
public.
I can tell you to the very day when it became obvious to me that I shouldn't put my arm around somebody in a photo.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Delhi. I was at a conference, and Ryan, it's the CEO of Cincia. She
Mm-hmm.
was wearing a sequin dress. Anyhow, she said, "Hey, let's do an Instagram, let's do a post." So I put my hand around her, and I felt the sequins, and I automatically felt dirty, like I shouldn't be touching this sequins.
Mm-hmm.
And from that day forth, I put my hands, like Lionel Messi, I put my hands in my pockets. So, like at conferences when we take photos and there's a bunch of people, I
Mm-hmm.
put my hands in my pockets. I don't put my hands around anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's because I was aware, like I felt those sequins on my arm, and I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling another
Something's
woman's
not right
sequins.
about this.
Something's not right. She
Mhm.
didn't care. I actually talked to her about it. Her name's Joe, and I talked to her. I said, I feel, so this just happened. And she goes, "Oh, I don't care." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not about you not caring. Like
Yeah.
it impacted me. Like I
Yeah.
just
She
can't."
didn't
It's
feel
like
right.
If
sitting in a cubicle and someone comes up and says, "How you doing today?" It's kind of like it's weird.
Yeah,
Like
because
it feels weird. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people, it's their personal space, and they're like, you are in
Yeah.
my personal space, don't touch
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And
again,
for others, especially in the South, we're okay with that. And like I said, we've done sexual harassment training, and it takes time. We really have to sit
oh
there
yeah,
and
Yeah.
show individuals how it can offend others, because they just do
we
not
hug,
see it that way.
we hug.
Yeah.
We grew
So
up
how
hugging.
so this is interesting then. So how does a company, let's say a large, global enterprise company, who, and
Mhm.
I know it's based regionally and culture in different areas, but if they have a corporate office in Louisiana, you go
Mhm.
down there and everyone's huggy huggy.
Mhm.
Then you come up here into the Philly area, and you're going to get punched in the face. Like, how do you handle that, right? Like, where is that line? Like,
Yeah,
it
you.
kind of goes to like, I have this weird thing, Lakeisha, where like if I see you at the gym, I go to the gym with you. I don't want to see you outside of the gym. Like, you're in your
I'm
gym
alone with
clothes.
you.
That's your gym. That you're the gym friend. Outside, you look very weird. I see work the same way. Like, I don't want to see work people outside of the work environment because
Yeah.
it feels weird to me. And same thing, like use the example of they come up like, "Hey, how you doing?" Hand on the shoulder.
Hmm.
Okay, if we're at a bar, different story. It
Right.
feels different. Now I'm at work, like, whoa, this is
What's
my
going on?
cue. Yeah,
Yeah.
why are you
What's
touching my
going on?
shoulder?
You shouldn't be
Yeah.
touching me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Stop touching
But
me.
it's part of it. Really, it is it's culture.
Yeah.
What is the culture, and you get it because, like I said, I'm from the South. I know a lot of times when I go up north and I'm traveling conferences or whatever, I am that hug. I'm if I see you, I'm
yeah,
going to hug you because that is me.
yeah,
But if I see that it's not embraced, it's fine. Then
yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
shake a hand or something
Is
like
that
that.
is that awkward moment of like,
Yeah,
do I do I
exactly.
not do I not?
Exactly. And I'm
Yeah,
like, when
yeah,
that
yeah.
happens, I'm
Uh-huh.
like, I'll just go ahead and put my hand. I'm like, how you doing?
Yeah.
So,
I got a hack for this as a southerner. Well, Texas is not
Mm.
necessarily a part of the South, but we'll just
Bless
go
your
with it.
heart, child.
So no, here's the deal.
I
I
learned that wasn't a good saying, Lakeisha.
no, I said no. So the hack is asking somebody, "Are you a hugger?"
yeah.
And if like it's consent. A lot of this stuff will come down to respect and consent, communication, some of
Eh,
the fundamental stuff. But like I've found it at like conferences, if I meet somebody, and let's say I know them, I'll still ask, and I'll go, "Are you a hugger? Are we hugging? What are we doing?" And I'll
Hmm.
let you shake
I
hands.
feel
Cool.
Yes.
creepy just listening to that though. Like, are
You're
you
like,
a
don't even ask
hugger?
me that. Don't even
Like, I
ask
feel
me.
like you're staring. Like, are you a hugger? Like, it's just weird.
Lakeisha knows what I'm talking about. You don't.
I mean,
I'm like,
people ask me all the
don't
time.
even
I get
ask
it.
me that.
Yeah, yeah. But then you put your hand out for a handshake. You're like, what's wrong with her? She's weird. Why is she not giving me a like? It's so confusing.
But at the end of the day, and so sometimes though, when you put your hand out, the person will like, oh, I'm a hugger. They'll say, I'm a hugger. So
That's
then
right.
you
Yeah,
hug, like give me,
yeah.
come on, bring it in, give me a hug. So it just
Yeah.
depends, It
Let's go
just
back to COVID and do the elbow bumps, and we're all good.
and then you're good. You're
Yeah, like
good.
I don't mind the hug, person. I don't mind, but it's
I
just
know people that were hugging during COVID.
it's that awkward moment of like, oh,
Like,
do
what are
I
we doing?
not?
What are
Yeah,
we
yeah.
doing?
And
What are
am
we
I gonna
doing?
be arrested for this? Like, these are things that go through my head now.
Yeah, yeah. Understood,
Yeah,
understood. And the
The
best
last,
way, honestly, is I will say, like William said, is to ask, but just to
yeah,
know also company wise, from a culture standpoint, what the cultures and
hmm
what that person usually work with them.
right.
Instead of just going up and hugging or whatever, understanding this is their space, they're good, but just being very mindful, especially of the touchy, thing.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
the intent. You said it earlier. And I think you said it a couple times. It comes down to some of it come down to intent. Some people just hug to hug because that's how they shake hands,
Right.
and some people hug for something else. And
Yeah.
hmm
so
And
it does.
people pick up on that and they recognize it. And when
Oh,
they do,
100%.
they will push away.
yeah,
And you have
yeah,
to know, okay, hey, if that's the case,
My,
I'm doing way
yeah,
too much. I need to
that's right.
stop. And
yeah.
don't do it again.
You get
Especially some,
1.5 seconds and don't sniff the hair. You're
You
good.
can't, you can't you can't linger.
right,
Lakeisha is
right.
There's
like, don't
no,
ever
no,
work for a company that I'm consulting with,
no,
please.
no. Last
You
question
know?
for me is, do you get asked about return on investment or metrics or like what they want to do training? It's in their heart. They
Mhm,
know that maybe they know they have a problem, etc. But they, for whatever reason, they don't feel like they can justify the expense.
mhm.
They struggle with that bit. Is that a thing, first of all? And if so, how do you respond, generally speaking?
So I'm trying to think. I don't think we most of they'll want to know, not so much for actual statistics or anything.
Right,
They want to know ultimately how, once it's done, how will
right.
it impact, the organization long term?
Oh,
Just how can it,
Oh,
you just triggered
how to
me.
make it lasting, sustainable. Like,
You just triggered me.
right.
oftentimes
Okay.
what we'll get is, okay, this has been great. We had that, that when they come to us, they'll tell us, that the employees are all excited about it. But once the in the past when they've done the training. So with us coming in, once we do our training, what can make it sustainable? And that's what when I go back to, like, it can't be a really a one-time thing. If you want to make something last, it also has to be something that you really infuse inside of the organization. You have to live it, you have to breathe it, you really have to mean it if you're going to do it. So let's talk about how we can keep this going, keep that momentum going, and how you're going to implement this inside of the organization.
So you said the word done, and that triggered something for me. And what it triggered is it ever done?
And honestly, it's not. If you want to continue to have a successful,
Right?
progressive organization, because as the organization evolves, it's
Yeah.
not just a checklist. You have
Right.
to continue. It's not a one and done.
Yeah.
As
Right.
the organization evolves, you continue to evolve, and you want to make sure that you go back. You may
Yeah.
revisit these things, or there may be some additives or whatever that you want to add into it to make it
Right.
better. But no, never done.
I don't
Yeah,
think it's ever done.
So William,
Great.
this is my, what's the word I'm looking for? My theory,
It's your
my
story.
whatever, my story. This is I hate when organizations push diversity recruitment onto a recruiter to sell diversity to candidates, because it's not their job. That is the job of the company to build that culture or that feeling within the company that then resonates through the entire process. I feel like this is the same thing. This is the same thing where, are they willing to, one, have an organization like you in the company
They got to be
long
committed.
term?
Yeah.
Committed, yeah. Like
I
this
see what you're
isn't a
saying.
3-month engagement, right? You're going to be here for 5 years, right? You're going to be here. You're part of our organization up until the point that we need to have our own internal HR organization to run this for us. But are you in the community, right? And you're not just sponsoring local sports teams, but are you in the community? Are you putting your
Yeah.
money behind this as a cause,
Is
right?
it
Not
something
just
that you
going on a
actually
press.
value? Is
That's
it
it.
something that you actually
Exactly.
value? Is
Yeah.
it a
If
part
you
of the values, the company that they eat, live, breathe by, and
Yes.
do
just
business
it
by?
becomes a part of who they are,
Then you
and
feel safe. Yeah.
I can
And
see
to your
that.
point, Ryan, when organizations just say, "Hey, we're going to make diversity a priority," and they just put it on the recruiter, really,
Yeah.
is it a priority? Are you really just trying to meet
No.
certain statistics to say, "Hey, we've
No.
recruited or we've hired this number of people," but then
Right.
is it something that you really value? It really that it has to come.
Mhm.
The value behind that has to come really way before that
Yeah,
so they
yeah. No,
come in,
the
because it's
the
not
answer
valuable
to
just to
that,
get them on the team.
yeah,
How
no,
do
the
you?
answer to that is just, how does Raytheon take them from Lockheed? Like, how do you
Mm,
recruiting
Yeah.
candidates away
yeah,
from your competitor? That's what that is, and that's what I
yeah.
feel like this should not be. Obviously, I
If
think
if
the only
if you're
reason you should
creating
lose, like,
if you're creating a workplace where harassment is zero tolerance, it's got to be every fiber of your being.
yes, yeah,
And Lakeisha has said this a number of times. It's got to be your values. If it's not your values,
yeah,
you're half stepping.
yeah,
You're giving it window service or putting lipstick on a
yeah,
pig, whatever.
And that's why
The
communication is so important, because just sticking it up there and sticking it on the wall and said, "Hey, these are
mm-hmm,
our
yeah,
word, our motto,
yeah,
for values." No, it has to be
yeah,
communicated. It has to be discussed what it means to the organization.
right.
drops
To
No,
mic, walks off
to
stage.
Oh,
We,
okay. We're gonna
we
end.
ran
I don't get this
we
set
got
up.
we ran out of time. Well,
Look,
that
each
just
has
means
been so good.
that
yes,
just
Yeah.
means we have to have her back because we didn't even talk about mental health
I
and how all
know,
this
I
stuff
know.
impacts mental health. You know what? That's our next show.
Let's
Yeah.
do
Lakeisha,
it.
thank you so much for carving out
Thank
time for
you.
us in the audience. I know you're busy. Thank you so much.